coming back to the farmers' protests, they're still in Delhi protesting and camping out. The government is trying to tire them out, but at least it's created an international ripple. Everybody knows there's a farmers' protest in India, and these neoliberal policies that are affecting small farmers. And speaking of small farmers, we have with us today Raj, Trishti, and Bedo, who undertook a 10,000 kilometer long road trip through rural USA for the documentary Deja Vu. It is a documentary on 4 decades of American farm experiments and its implications on the largest farmer protest, which is taking place in India right now. So, Miraj, do you want to introduce our guests, our first guest?
Definitely. So, Srishti Agrawal is an accomplished physicist. She is pursuing her doctoral degree at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Srishti is also a social activist, and she has been involved in several diasporic projects. She is pursuing rights and justice of people of India. She's very, very active. And she has also turned a filmmaker with her recent project Deja Vu.
This was given to us by Raj. So, Trishti, if you want to edit something, you let us know. So, moving on to Rajashik Tarafdar, he is also pursuing his doctorate degree. It is at Caltech. He's working on quantum information and gravitational physics. He is our original Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, but also social, unlike him. Rajashik is social activist. He's also been involved in a lot of diasporic groups and human rights for India. And this is also his first movie.
So, Dr. Vidarbha Payne is a national award-winning filmmaker. He got national award for his movie Chittagong. He is a director, producer, he's a social activist, and a scientist. He worked at NASA for 15 years. He has more than 90 patents to his credit, thanks to the invention of CMOS imaging technology, and he was part of that team that invented CMOS technology. We can carry small cameras in our smartphones, and we can get pictures from the space. He is inducted to the US Space Technology Hall of Fame. He has authored more than 150 research articles and technical papers. He taught CMOS imaging at UCLA. So he's many things.
So basically, for Bedo, we have 5 resumes in one. But yeah, we want to thank you guys for coming on our podcast, and we're very excited to dive into this. So I just want to ask this. The first question is, I want to ask everyone, can you tell us briefly about the film and why it is important to you? Bedo, if you want to start, and then we can move on.
Sure. So, the movie kind of started when I was doing, as I've always said, our Prime Minister Modi, one thing that we have to give it to him is that he makes you think. He makes you look at things in depth. So when these farm laws came out, I started researching about what these farm laws are about. And in that process, I realized that what has happened in America in the last 4 decades has an uncanny similarity with what these laws are going to do, which should not actually come as a surprise. I mean, so everything is very exciting before you have figured it out. But when we figured it out, it was very, very clear that that's something that what these laws are going to do is not a matter of speculation. It has already happened in front of us. So it was very, very clear that we should chronicle that. And then came, and then Rajshik and Srishti with their, I'll let them speak, with their amazing initiative, very quickly got this project going.
Srishti, do you want to add something?
Yes. So for me also it was similar, but we are activists and we keep talking about. So I was talking about the farmers' protests in social media with my family, and one thing that often came about was that you are sitting in US, everything is modernized there, the agriculture there is so different, so you just don't want India to progress, or what do you know, the typical things that we hear. So, and then when Bedo called and said that, let's look at what's happening here, and we started reading about it, which is why it's called Deja Vu. It was like, what, if very very similar things, in every way it happened here, and so we had to chronicle that, we had to bring it out.
Yeah, that is, I mean, it's very important for us to know history. And Raj, anything you want to add from your perspective?
Um, it's hard to say why. So you mentioned, right, why it's important for us. I guess Bedo and Prishti covered it. I can just add that uh, the reason all of us are socially active, the reason you guys are running this show is because all of these laws that are very dryly present in the parliament have very long-standing implications. And it has very long-standing implications, especially for the youth of the country, which are going to have to live with the implications of these laws. And fortunately for us, growing up in a generation that has had access to social media and all, you would think that the first thing that we should be doing is going back and looking up what has been the experience of pretty much anything that is introduced. Unfortunately for us, that doesn't get done often, and so this was just this was an intuitive thing to do. Like, we had to go out and do it.
So I was researching for this podcast, reading an article from 1996 about the Omnibus Farm Bill in the US. And by the time I reached to the end of that article, I understood why the title is Deja Vu. I just wanted to hash that out real quick before I move to the next question. So this is for Bedo. You jump between scientific research and social activism. And I also belong to the scientific community. And what I have experienced is that especially people who have reached to the accomplishment like yours live in kind of a bubble of their own. So my question to you is that, were you always involved so much with the society, or was there something that triggered that involvement?
People ask me, why are you so political? And
Exactly.
my answer always is, why aren't you political? Politics is used in a very negative way. You talk about party politics, you talk about office politics. Politics
Right.
is equated with shenanigans. That's what the usual thing is. But if you actually look about it, politics is what belongs to the polity, is what belongs to all of us, is what's going to affect all of us. You saw in India that one act of recklessness by the Indian government caused this kind of calamity for Indians.
Switching gears, I want to ask this to Raj and Shrishti. It's a very easy question. Maybe. And you guys are still in the, beginning of your research career, and that gets competitive. And I just wanted to know how you guys are trying to balance the pressure of like scientific research and social activism. And Shrishti, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. No, sometimes it does get overwhelming, but I think getting involved in the diasporic community in US has actually helped me in some ways, even in my research, because otherwise like I'm not a person who can just keep doing one thing all the time. And when I was like I myself felt that once I started getting involved in Ghadar and in the diaspora, it also broadened my horizon, and I had something to look forward to apart from work. So it created sort of a balance which a lot of us grad students generally miss. And then I've been really lucky to have I work with two groups, and both my professors are the best people in the world, I would say. Like, they've been really supportive. Like, I want to take a month off to go and shoot the film, that's okay, whatever I want to do. So I think I've been really lucky that way.
So grad students who want to do research, contact us.
So
Yeah,
I want to
Raj.
give a slightly different answer to that.
Yes, please.
My question is, do we really have a choice?
Mhm.
The only thing I'm trying to say is that if you were the least bit empathetic about what is about people, what is happening today in society is going to shake you. If you just are ready to go out and see and meet one of these people who are hungry in India today, who are being incarcerated for the flimsiest of reasons, who are who are being raped, killed on a daily basis. How can you sit quiet? I would very much prefer if I didn't have to do this, but as long as as long as the situations prevail, I don't think I have a choice.
Moving on to the next one, and this is again for all of you. When you're planning to make this movie, you might have ideas what you're going to see. You might have expectations. So when you went out to actually see the condition in the rural America, was it different? How different was that? And did it come as a surprise?
Uh, yes, it was very surprising for me at least because I'd just been in US for 1.5 years and I'd grown up watching Friends and all those American TV shows, and even if I'd read that the impacts, I'd read the stats, I knew that most of the farmers were not making any money from the farms. I still had this picture of America, and I could not have imagined what I saw, and it was as different as possible. I mean, watching towns ghosted, schools for sale, it was unbelievable for me personally. I mean, and the level of poverty, not being like farmers not being able to feed themselves, living on food stamps, the high rates of suicide, it was a journey which if someone had told me, I would not have believed if I had not seen it myself.
Yeah, the US in our minds is that shown in Hollywood, so very
Yes.
wishy-washy image.
Yeah, and right before we set out for the mid US trip, we had gone to California, right? Like we had gone to Bakersfield and we had seen those huge farms, and that had kind of, fit into the picture I had. So I was
Right.
like, okay, fine, things are bad, but the farms would still be like that, and the farmers would, how much worse can it be? But yeah, it's a story to tell.
So Srishti commented on despair, and Bedo probably might add on it a bit more. I want to comment on something slightly different in that case. That we were like four brown folks going to the so-called Trump's America, the racist America, red America. But the welcome we received pretty much everywhere we went was just beyond any expectations we had. People were throwing open their doors in the midst of COVID. This is at a time when the vaccines had not come in. People we were visiting, their friends had died a week before, but they were telling us that if somehow, if this helps communicate the experiences they had out here to the folks in India, so that we do not repeat that same mistake, they were ready to do it. And that connection is something which you wouldn't hear in the mainstream media. In mainstream media, the way you hear about these people is rural folks, racist, xenophobic.
Right.
That's the way you think about it. But there is a common thing that ties all of us up, that all of us want to really just have a good quality of life. And these people had been lied to, had been betrayed, and they were just hoping that the same doesn't happen in India at this stage. That was something which that I was not ready for.
Very quick points I want to make, that it's the trip was taken not by three of us but by four of us. There's a fourth person also, Rumela Ganguly. She's a theater actor and so on. And I think her experience was probably the most transformative, if you will, because she's not a political person. For her, it was really an eye-opening thing. I think that the pure human element is what touched her. And I think what should touch everybody, that it's actually a human tragedy that we witnessed. And second part that I want to add along with that is the fact that, when you talk to people with a liberal bent of mind, people from urban land, they will immediately say, working people, or certainly farmers, are xenophobic, redneck, racist, blah, and so on and so forth. You talk to them and you understand that that's where that has come from. You actually begin to understand why they were rooting for Trump.
Right.
You actually understand what happens when people are made desperate. I think this is one element that we should understand. This is probably something that explains the rise of the right wing. The right wing is coming out as false messiahs of hope.
Right.
That was one of the things that we repeatedly heard, that they still hope that something will change. The third thing I would say is that one of the farmer activists said very so beautifully, and that has stayed with me, is that what comes after agri is culture, not business.
Right.
So the next question is sort of answered, but maybe I'll ask it again. What is the link between what is happening in India today and what happened in the US earlier in context of privatization of farming?
In India, what we saw with the new 3 farm bills, in essence, there are 3 characteristics to it. One is the opening up of agriculture. Second is not directly, but implicitly taking away protections through MSPs, because the farmers believe that the APMCs will slowly lose relevance and therefore the MSP protections will go away. And the third is giving the political structure or legal structure required for contract farming to flourish in the country. Now, all 3 of these at different stages around the 80s were what were introduced in the US by Reagan and by some previous administrations. That's why we wanted to look at America, because MSP as a structure existed in the US from as back as the 30s. They call it parity. So what happened out here was, with Reagan, the parity supports for several grains and dairy were very steadily reduced. What was argued is that market is going to take care of price discovery and so on, which is what the Indian establishment is also trying to argue. What we see today is that cost of products like milk, meat, or grains is as low as they had been as back as the Civil War in the US. That has been the experience of the farmers out here. And similarly, with contract farming, around 70 to 80% of contract farmers in poultry in the US currently live under the poverty line. And this is in a country which is the richest in the world. At the same time, the profits of the corporations that are employing these so-called contract farmers have gone through the roof and expanded their influences to other countries such as Mexico and even India. So to give you an example, one of the big corporations of the US, Cargill, is actually the second largest buyer of rice in India, just behind the government of India. The last part of it came, as you mentioned, in the 90s with the Freedom to Farm, which was dubbed by the farmer as Freedom to Feel Act, under which the corporations were given the rights to engage in agriculture unrestrictedly, to the point that today, the last piece of protection that the farmers had through their land is being owned by multimillionaire corporations.
I want to add one point here, which is that Rachik said, right, that the
Yeah.
prices that the farmers received kept decreasing. It's all, like some of the commodities you'd see is not changed, has hardly changed in the last 50,
Yeah.
70 years. But that's not true for the prices that consumers pay. So they keep telling you that it's going to be beneficial for the consumers, but really all that has changed when you look at a dollar consumption, right?
Yeah.
So if out of a dollar that a consumer was spending back in 80s, 50% of it was going to the farmers. Now
Right.
only 14% of it is going to the farmers. So you're still paying more. The farmers are getting lower than ever before, and all this money is being made by these big corporations. So one of the farmers, Joe Maxwell, had put it really well. He said that they came to us and told us that, just deal with us directly. Let's get rid of these middlemen because they're taking away your profits, which is very similar to what is
Right.
being told in India. And he said that, and they told us these stories of prosperity, and we bought into it. It was just too good. And a few years later, when they had completely depressed the prices, and we looked around to find some other buyer, we had no one. They had blackballed every single person out of the market, and all that remained was just that one person who had come and told me that, deal with me directly and I'll give you all the profits. So so that is very important to realize, that it's not just about the farmers, it's about everyone. It's about the consumers. It is about all these local jobs, all this local economy that is going to go away. For example, I was talking about the rural devastation that we saw. So what happens is, once you have taken away all these middle businesses that were dealing with the farmers, and the farmlands have become concentrated. So in the same village where you had 100 farmers, you now have 5 farmers. So you don't have a community there to thrive anymore. And so people
Right.
move out to cities to try to find whatever job they can, mostly working as wage laborers in big corporations. And so there's nothing left in the rural areas to sustain life anymore. There's no taxes, there's no one to go to school, there's no community to sustain the church, and all you see is those, hollow communities and big farmlands owned by the corporations. And that is really not the future that we want to believe in.
Yeah. I also wanted to add that just listening to you guys, that this is for our listeners, that this is not going to happen overnight. You might see a rise in prices and farmers being okay, but then as monopolies start happening, as the Ambanis and the Adanis take over more and more, that's when it'll hit.
It's not lifetime. It happens very, very soon. We already have experience in India on that. In Bihar, these APMCs, government mandis, were taken away in 2004. Bihar, they legislated and taken away. And initially, in I have the data actually. For the first few years, the price actually rose. What prices? Meaning farm gate prices, what a farmer gets, and then it tanked to the point where Bihar is today one of the least, remunerative state in terms of farm produce. Like, think of a pond with lots of small fish, and you open it up and let a couple of big fish come in. Whose population do you think will go up, and who do you think will suffer?
Mm-hmm.
Will the small fish eat the big fish, or the big fish eat the small fish?
Yeah, so I want to change gears a bit, move a little bit to the lighter part of the discussion. There's been a lot of statistics and stuff. So you guys went on a 10,000 kilometer long trip, and it's a pretty long trip. Do you have some memorable moments that you would like to share with us?
Okay.
Can I try one? So there was a stretch where we had
Oh,
to go
yes.
for about like 100 miles and there was no gas station. And Rumela was driving. And Rumela is very particular about at least having like half a tank of gas. And we see like around 40 miles on, there is a gas station. On the map, we don't know if it's going to be open because this is in the middle of nowhere. And we have like 30 miles of gas.
Let me correct you on that. We knew it was open. It was shutting
Yes.
at 9.
Yes.
And we did not know if we will make it, like going at the speed that we were going, whether we will make it by 9 o'clock. And that's the only gas station.
We were supposed to.
Yes.
The estimate was 9.5. So we were short on time. We were short on gas. We couldn't accelerate too much, otherwise the gas would probably run out. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And in the midst of that, Rumela started running all the weirdest scenarios that could go happen. Had the gas run out?
About walking.
And I can't explain how hilarious that was. But it was like we even thought of reenacting that and recording it because of the content that was there at the moment. But that was one of the events that I
and towards the end, it was like 3 miles left and 2 miles of gas. It was like the last few overs in India-Pakistan match. Like, maybe we'll make it, maybe not.
So, by the way, I want to talk about the movie that you made before, Lifting the Veil. You investigated, and I watched that movie, and again, it was like what is happening in India is not really surprising. So, in that movie, you investigated the impact of economic liberalization on the marginalized groups in India. So now, after so many years in the hindsight, did you expect a different outcome, or would you say that this is what is happening is very much what
I think this is probably a very, very good segue to bring up one of the things that I have been meaning to talk about. Is that one of the important things that the farmers' movement has done, apart from many other things, is that it has put a huge dent in this Hindutva narrative, both from the left and from the right. Because, whenever you talk about BJP, what is the first thing you talk about? You talk about Hindutva. You talk about RSS. You talk about Hindu Rashtra. You completely forget that what BJP is carrying on is actually what was started exactly 30 years ago. Let's not forget, in 2018, one person got 85% of the wealth. So are we to say that the 99% that was deprived were not Hindus?
Yeah, and farmers, how they have been narrating and several times speaking, they have been very, very clear in what they want to convey. And that is, I think, has made this thing so successful, that the protest itself is so clear about where they're connecting, what they're talking.
There is one thing we have not commented on so far. I want to very quickly point it out. So the laws that were brought in 1991 were meant to give control of newly generated wealth into the hands of these big firms, big corporations, big billionaires, and so on. How these laws are even more damaging is that this is going to allow for the transfer of existing wealth further into the hands of these big corporations.
So in this episode of our podcast, we talk about the movie People Life. There is always, when you're making a documentary or a film, right, you notice this disconnect of the people, of filmmakers viewing from the outside. Your views also change the documentary or the film. So how do you reconcile this and still keep true to the subject of the documentary?
So I think this question has been a very old philosophical question of the connection between subjective and objective. Any work of art always has this directed focus, right? So there is that subjective element. What balances this, especially in the case of documentary, let's just stick to documentary, is whether what that person is talking about is borne out not just by facts, but the general trend of what has happened. So for instance, when we talk about the opening up of the economy has caused devastation of small farms and has enriched the large farms. Is this an objective fact or not? It is an objective fact. Is that being subjectively told through people's own experience by the farmers? That's where the subjective and the objective come together. What the documentary does, if a good documentary it is that the actors or the players in the documentary, the people who you are hearing them in a human way. But what they're talking about is a very, very well-defined objective phenomena, the mainstream objective phenomena.
We wanted to know if there's a timeline that you're expecting the movie will be completed. When and where can we watch the film? Anything you want to tell the listeners about funding? All of that stuff. Anything you guys want to say?
No, look, I mean, we are obviously very, very late. I mean, we expected this to finish. It said the documentary is always made at the edit table, and that's very true for this as well. I would like to get it out as soon as possible. I mean, we are, as I said, we are late, but I expect that to be done in a month and a half's time. And I think the way it has evolved, we would probably have, I mean, that's also a lot of internal discussion going in as to how best to take it out. We definitely want to use a social media, and that is, I think, a conversation that we need to begin. Of course, I think it's coming to a kind of quality that where we can even aim for OTT platforms and so on and so forth. I think that's also going to happen. But I think the first order of business is to send it out across social media, and exactly what form we should send it out. Maybe bits and pieces of this could be taken and done. These are all matters of discussion where we would want input from everybody else. And the other input that we need from people is, of course, money. I think this is a good place for me to at least pitch, and I'm sure Rajshek and Srishti will do the same thing. Nothing happens without money. So far, we have been kind of self-financing it. We have had people that have stepped up and have given us funds. We are still way short. There is a GoFundMe page, and I think we need to renew that page again. But I think we would very much, the way we believe is kind of what the Bernie Sanders campaign is all about. Those who are stakeholders, those who would use this as a tool for their outreach, for their work, those who would benefit from it in terms of pushing the political envelope along, they are the ones who should be funding it. Of course, certainly we are not expecting them to be bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars, but at whatever level you can, whether you're a professional, you're a student, you're a business person, you're a farmer, you're a professor, whatever have you, help us. This is it's an important project. I think it's something that will benefit both America and India. People.
On that note, I think we should end our long discussion with 4 scientists and an artist, I guess.
So we'll put the link for the GoFundMe page on the description. You can click on that and contribute and support the movie. And thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Bedo, Raj, Srishti, to come on the podcast. Guys, please go on the GoFundMe page. As we talked, nothing comes for free. Follow us on our social media, _Ghadar. And we hope that the film will come out very soon and we'll get to watch it.